I wanted to talk a little bit now just about some of the, I guess, not partisan politics, right? I'm not really interested if you're a Democrat or Republican, but more interested in some of the ways that even a gun history channel has run up against the politics of our era, right? Especially when it comes to being a large channel on YouTube in particular, which is, kind of which is the largest video platform in the world, the second largest website in the world, right? And where you've had quite a lot of success, but also quite a lot of struggle with the platform as it's grown and matured, and as it's tried to sort of find a way of regulating gun content, which oftentimes I think you and others in the community of gun YouTubers have felt has gone too far in how they've approached what can be monetized, what can be on the platform at all, these sorts of things. So, and you've personally made some significant news at points with, considering working with other platforms, not monetizing content in order to have more flexibility of what you post, and monetizing in different ways to try and support your vision for the channel without having to compromise based on what YouTube determines can be monetized by their AdSense systems. Can you just talk a little bit about your experience over the last several years with this back and forth, and what you've taken away from it, and what you're kind of looking to in the future as the answer to these sort of struggles that you've had?
Oof, boy, I wish I knew the answer to what the future, what future solution there will be. I'm always interested in potential ones, but it's still kind of an open question for now. When it comes to YouTube, there are a number of problems stacked together, and it's easy to jump to sort of a hyperbole answer that is YouTube hates guns because they're a bunch of whatever. Fundamentally, the problem with YouTube is that it is advertiser supported, which on the one hand is a fantastic opportunity and tool for creators on YouTube, because it allows people to make content and make a living from it without having to go out and be their own marketing department. And it also means that that content can be freely available to anyone. The problem, the conundrum I have always run up to of if you're not monetizing the content is, generally speaking, the alternative is putting it behind a paywall. And once it's behind a paywall, no one sees it. It doesn't grow and it's not accessible. And for me, fundamentally, one of the core principles of Forgotten Weapons is this. My whole purpose is making this information freely, publicly accessible. And so I'm not willing to put it behind a paywall exclusively. So there are, like, I do use Floatplane, which is a very, that is a site that is a paywall because it pays for its own independent hosting. And I'm willing to do that because I also have it on YouTube where it is not behind a paywall. Patreon, of course, has been a fantastic alternative for many of these channels, for many people in this situation. But to get back to YouTube for a moment, the downside to their monetization is that YouTube doesn't have a very sophisticated way for advertisers to choose where their advertisements go. And so what they have ended up with is a system where YouTube's trying to bubble wrap all their content and make it very safe for very large corporate sponsors, corporate advertisers, because that's where most of the money is. And they aren't willing or aren't able, I don't know if it's one or both, to make a system that's granular enough to allow a company to choose where their advertisements are going to go. And so it's not just guns that have been impacted by this. It's a whole variety of subject matter that are by any number of, basically by any, if it's by anyone's opinion on the fringes, then YouTube is scared of it. And it doesn't matter if it's on a right-wing fringe or a left-wing fringe or some other fringe on another axis of the political spectrum. If it is content that has the potential to get in the news and some company goes, oh my God, how did my Coca-Cola ad get in front of blah content, which some group of people are now outraged by. And then this group of outraged people decides to boycott Coke or whatever giant sponsor. That's what YouTube's trying to avoid. And that that exact phenomenon hit back in about 2016. And that's what everyone refers to as adpocalypse, which led to the
Right.
system YouTube has now, which is limited to this thing of like ads, maybe some ads and no ads. And the maybe some ads, and this leads to the second tier of this problem, the maybe some ads rules are extremely poorly written. They're written by people who have no real concept of any of these different types of subject matter. And so you end up with, like, for several years, according to the rules, you could not monetize a video that showed firearm disassembly. And you still can't show it, you can't monetize it if it shows like firearms modification is one. And the question then becomes, what the heck is modification? Like, I've got, say, this 100-year-old Enfield that was re-arsenaled and converted from this configuration to that configuration. Is that scary, modification? What they really kind of mean is things that make the gun look more scarier. Um, but they don't. The people writing the rules don't really understand it, and the people enforcing the rules really don't understand it, because I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty confident that these rules are enforced by essentially minimum wage call center employees who go through appeals and look at stuff. And they're on a timetable and they don't really know what they're looking at. And they're not in a position to make a good judgment. And so it really, it puts a degree of uncertainty into the process that's very unpleasant for all of the people who are creating this content. YouTube is very non-transparent. It's very difficult to actually talk to someone. YouTube has deliberately adopted a policy of, we will not tell you if we determine that your video is against our rules, whether you can't have some ads or you can't have any ads or whatever it is, we will not tell you why. Because if we tell you why, you'll be able to figure out a way around our rules, which is completely
Right.
backwards. Like, if you want people to follow the standards, you at least have to understand what the standard is. But they've taken this just really infuriating, in some cases, this really obnoxious approach of, well, if we told you what the rules are, then you'd sneak around them. So we'll just not tell you.
Yeah,
That's difficult.
this seems to be a
with.
common. Yeah, absolutely. It seems to be a common thread among the major social media platforms as well. Facebook does basically the same thing with its content moderation policies. And it, obviously, to be fair to these giant companies, that's kind of, at the end of the day, how you have to do it to some degree. Maybe not they should probably explain their rules better, but you kind of have to use automation because of how much content is put on your platform. You could never hire enough people to moderate it manually. And then you have to rely on, generally speaking, very low wage, high worked individuals with, low levels of understanding of the content they're moderating to.
I think you're making an assumption there that we needn't make, or we should at least be visible about. And that is that everything ought to be monetized on Facebook or YouTube, because there is a perfectly
Sure.
acceptable alternative, which is in fact how YouTube originally was, which was that they didn't monetize anything until they invited you into the monetization program, at which point they do have control over it. They can say, this is content that we're comfortable with, and this is content we're not. And we can actually have a real human being who understands these issues, who can talk to creators and say, well, this, we're comfortable with this, but we don't want this, or we would rather see this in this way. And then a creator can make a decision about whether or not they're willing to go with that system or refrain from monetizing it. But what these companies, what Facebook and YouTube in particular have done, is they've taken the approach of, we must put ads absolutely everywhere. And at that point, yeah, there's no way that they can have the staff to actually have any idea what they're monetizing. But the only reason they have to do that is because they want the money from absolutely the maximum number of ads. There is a compromise there that could be a compromise of the number of ads and the quality of the content. And they're deliberately making that choice all in favor of more monetization.